and welcome to Curated Conversations, a podcast by the Grand Rapids African American Health Institute, where we talk all things health and wellness. My name is Ashley, and I will be your host for today's conversation. Today, we are sitting here with members of the Sexual Health and Equity Council, where their mission is to promote sexual health equity by addressing disparities in sexual and reproductive health care access, education, and services for every community member. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Before we get started, I'll go ahead and give you all a moment to go around and introduce yourselves and just let us know how you all play a role in this.
So my name is Ajane Robinson Figueiredo. Born here in Grand Rapids, came back to get involved in my community, and I have a nonprofit consulting business called Robbie Fix Consulting, and I've been working on some maternal health projects in the community, promoting maternal mental health, maternal sexual health, health all around, to deal with some disparities, and also being a part of the Sexual Health Equity Council has been really transformational and helpful in being able to have better discussions and connections with the community on making sure that we're doing better with our bodies.
My name is Brandi Berry, and I too, born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I currently am employed with the Kent County Health Department, where I supervise. Today, I'm thinking it's 3 or 4 public health programs. The world is changing so much every day. And I also sit on a variety of public and community boards and spaces. I also host a whole part of a business here in Grand Rapids called EmpowerHer, where my lovely coworker here and we really just came up with the notion. So I'm also a certified doula, and in that work, we came across so many young people. I shouldn't even say young, just birthing people in general who didn't know simple things like the mechanics of how they actually got pregnant. And then that developed into other conversations about just pleasure in general. And then we learned about just the disparities there are within the general sexual health community. So we then started Empower Her, which is a business that we hold here in Grand Rapids. And I am honored to be here.
My name is Atabia Williams. I am a Detroit native, so not from Grand Rapids, but I've been stuck here ever since I graduated. Ever since I graduated from Grand Valley, it's been an amazing experience. I am a community-based doula and a community sex educator. I'm currently enrolled in the University of Michigan sex education program. It's a year program. I will graduate next February, so we'll do that. And then I can go sit for the board to be a certified sex educator. So, like my colleague Brandi said, we started Empower Her because as community-based doulas, we noticed that nobody really knew how they got pregnant, and that was kind of scary. So we started to have candid conversations about sex and all type of things that we talk about every day, and we're like, we need to have other people have these conversations too. So one of our mottos in Empower Her is pleasure versus patriarchy. So we make sure that we try to debunk all of the things that we've traditionally learned about sex and education and get the information to our people. So I'm happy to be here too.
Yeah. So let's just get right into that. We'll start very, very general. We'll take it back to health class back in middle school. What are just some of the basic things that people should know about general sexual health?
I think some of the well, let's talk about what they tell you. I think in like most of the educational systems, you only are taught don't have sex because you'll get pregnant and die, and that's just about it. Or it's either the abstinence route, which is good in a sense, but they forget to give people the education that they need. As doulas, we give people evidence-based information so that they have all the tools to make informed decisions. And sometimes in the sexual education, they lack giving people any type of education at all. So they're not able to make conscious decisions. Abstinence is okay, but you don't teach people about STDs. You don't teach people about condoms. You don't teach people about consent and having conversations. And I think for us, speaking for me and Brandi, I know consent and conversations is one of the biggest things that we hit on, because if you can't talk about what you like and what you don't like, or even if you don't know what you like and what you don't like, then trying to figure that out with somebody else is really, really hard.
Absolutely. I think part of that too is, when we're talking about sexual education, we only really get it once in elementary school, and then when I'm much older than everyone here, but when I took it, you're separated, so there's already some stigma there and some shame there, and then you're taught to fear each other. You're taught all of these things. It's fear based, And what nobody shares with you is that sex can be beautiful. It feels good. And so that becomes the catch-22 there. So I'm not supposed to do this thing that feels amazing. So what do I do with that information? Who do I talk to about it? Because now I'm taught to fear it. I can't go talk to my parents about it because nobody in my home is talking about it. And then, I spent many years, I worked for Children's Protective Services for over 20 years. And in that space, I came across so many young people who had been violated. And it's because someone who their parents introduced into their environment and told them to trust this person. And then that person took advantage of them. And so, again, sex feels good, right? So this bad thing is happening to me, but I don't have anyone to talk to about it. I don't have the words to talk to anyone about it. So we're like set up for failure in our sexual health journeys from childhood. I am very much an advocate for teaching children the words for their body parts, and I think that's something that escapes us, particularly in the Black community. And then sexual health in education, again, is a journey, and we do ourselves a disservice. Our society does a disservice by just offering us this very generic information in elementary school, and then you don't get it anymore. So the argument there, or the thought there, is that I'm supposed to be this virginal woman, and so I get this information once in the 5th grade that ultimately I will learn that it's something that feels good, but I'm not supposed to do it. Then I'm supposed to find this perfect person and marry them and know how to do all these sexual things the day after I married them. But nobody taught me any of these things. I don't have anybody to talk to about it. All my friends are lying about either the sex that they're having or they're not having.
Right.
So where do you go for a clear conversation? I am in my late 40s, and I am recently divorced. And so now that I encounter my peers, it's different dating now. So I married my high school sweetheart, so I never really had an opportunity to date. But when I look at dating now and I look at my peers, so that conversation looks totally different now in our late 40s. But again, there's so much shame, and so people aren't having the conversation. It's just the juxtaposition of all these things is just very odd, and it's unfair, and we're doing a disservice to ourselves. And then we wonder why our STD rates are the way that they are.
I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. Like, we already addressed a lot, but a couple of things that sparked in my mind were going back to my education about sexual health in high school, right? And I was so looking forward to this conversation because you see in the movies and there's like comical sketches around it, and then there's like serious representations of what is it going to be like when you're in school. And there's so many expectations you have built up around this stage in your life where you're becoming into your young adulthood. So I was excited, and then we get into the class, and for one, we did not talk about STIs really at all. What did we talk about? We talked about the reproductive process. And so knowing logically and biologically how that process works, how pregnancy works, a sperm cell fertilizes an egg, turns into a zygote, right? And so on and so on. But that was pretty much the extent of it. Talking about the reproductive parts, penis, vagina, minus the fact that they didn't even refer to a vulva. I don't think I learned the term vulva until I was in college, which is the technical actual term for the whole area. The vagina is what's inside. So, yeah, even that education was limited. And I think that a lot of the conversation that happens around safe sex and sexual health revolves a lot around pregnancy and avoiding pregnancy, but we miss a major part of the conversation about STIs, which I think is part of what contributes to it being so rampant in our communities, because people aren't really worried about the STIs and, oh, I can clear that up or I can get rid of that, which you can't for all of them. Right. But then, like, it's, I don't want a baby, which, that's important as a part of the conversation too, and having autonomy over when and when you do not have children. But I think that other piece of it in talking about those infections is very important, and what that can mean for your life, and the stigma and the shame around it, I think also comes from the fact that we're missing those conversations. Another piece of what we address a little bit here is just in conversations on how to speak up for your body and your autonomy. I speak about autonomy a lot because of my philosophy background. And I study like ethics and talk about principles of justice and things like that. But autonomy is a core principle behind how you get justice, right? And I think one key way in which we can promote autonomy and teach autonomy, which again is just this term to talk about how do you run your own life, how do you run your own body and self. I think ways in which we can teach that are by giving tools of information, right? Another piece of philosophy is epistemology. I talk about these things on a YouTube channel. I have to. I have a Black philosophy page, and so I break down these different topics. But epistemology is the study in which we talk about the study of knowledge, right? And there's this thing called epistemic justice, which is basically you get justice through knowledge. You can use knowledge as a tool for justice. And I fully believe that when you provide more knowledge to people to be able to use for themselves in a way that they can understand, then you are more in line with being able to achieve justice, right? So breaking that down to what we're talking about, when, like Brandi was just saying, right, when people can have the words for what's going on with them and being able to speak up for themselves and what's happening to them, knowing how to talk about it because they have vocabulary and they have concepts, then they can actually be able to better protect themselves and engage in these conversations. So I'm also in full support of talking to your children about this, but not even just the children, the adults. And sometimes with our adults, we have to challenge ourselves to go back into some of our histories and traumas and open the door. I was so happy that as a young child, my mom was continuing to talk to me about safe sex and sexual health and some of the things that she went through, to better contextualize what is safe, what is not. It's okay. If somebody tells you that they're going to hurt me if you tell on them or anything like that, that's a lie. Statistically, they really don't do anything. Those are really important conversations that made me feel safe and able to talk about things. And, you know, I still ended up having sexual assaults happen in my life, but I didn't feel like I was going to die if I told my mom, right? I was able to tell her, and she was able to then step in and help me and support, which not everybody gets support when they speak up. But I think knowing how, who, and when to go to talk about these things is really important.
No, thank you for that. I agree. I think a lot of the conversation about sex is what we were taught. It's like specifically just about sex and, you know, like pregnancy and then, you know, maybe a STI here or there. But Atabia, you said something that just in recent years you didn't really hear, and that's consent. And we don't talk about that surrounding, like, first of all, you have to give consent, you know, in order for that. So I know that's an entirely different conversation, but can we touch on a little bit just about consent and what that means and the importance of it?
This is what she and I talk about all the time on our
Yes.
podcast. I just want to say this, and then she can take it away because she will have a lot more to add. As people of color, our consent and our body autonomy are taken from us in childhood, dare I say infancy, with subtle things that we say to children, specifically young women. You know, the responsibility is all on the girl. Go get dressed. You shouldn't wear this. Put something on, your uncle coming over. It's so unfair, just the weight of certain conversations and certain behaviors are placed on young children. And in those moments, you learn to hide. You learn that my body really doesn't belong to me. I don't really, what is consent? Because I can't say no anyway.
Right.
So we're never even taught to consent. In a larger conversation about that, I don't feel like our communities are really even taught how to date. We, you know, it's integrated. So even in childhood, you're taught, get a man, keep him by any means necessary. It doesn't matter, you know, all the things that might be happening in the context of that relationship, if it's good or bad for you. But keep him, because if you can't keep him or he's doing something that's disingenuous to the relationship, that's also your fault too. So, you know, what is consent? Because I can't say no. And then again, in the dating space, we aren't even taught how to have those conversations, how to sit with someone. How was your day? And listening, because we're not really listening. I'm listening to respond to what Tay is about to say, because I got to one-up you in this conversation, right? And that's what dating turns into, these one-upping sessions, so that we can take pictures and have content. So people don't even know what consent means. And then when we find ourselves in these spaces where it's like, okay, yep, I was sending so-and-so these text messages all week about these things that I was going to do. And in those moments, sounded good. But
Nobody
now
asked
that
for
we're
that.
here and I'm not really interested, changed my mind. Maybe I even said yes 5 minutes ago, but now not so much. That's no.
Yep.
And it's okay. But we don't feel empowered to stand up and be like, yeah, I'm out, or I'm going to head out. Because again, it's like, okay, I got to keep this person around. So I'm just going to grin and bear it and stay here in this space and give away myself and my no. Because we haven't been empowered to have that from childhood. That is taken away from us.
I think when we talk about Black women specifically, when we think about Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, the enslaved women that were worked on by James Marion Sims, we've had a long history of not having autonomy over our bodies or not having consent. And when we think about those pictures that you see these enslaved women presumably just willingly and just on this table to get operated on. But we know that was not the case. We know that they probably did not have clothes on. We know that they weren't just peeking and helping. We know that they were mutilated and their bodies were taken advantage of. So we have a long history of not having consent over ourselves. And like Brandi said, when your uncle comes over or somebody comes to the house, it's always, oh, you got to put clothes on. So there's that shame about our bodies from get-go. And when we grow up and we get older, how are we supposed to advocate for ourselves? I think also in the Black community, and not to, put a damper on the way that our parents have raised us, because they only knew what they knew. But when we think about some of the information that was passed down or some of the information that wasn't passed down, when we talk about our bodies, it's just not fair. And then we grow up to think like, oh, well, my body, I need to hide my body. Or even when we have conversations with adults, you can't talk back. You can't say this. You can't say that. So then when I get older and somebody tells me I can't say things to them, or when I'm having a conversation with my partner, I could also be internalizing that too. So trying to promote people to have those conversations about consent and what consent even looks like and how consent can change. And you can be in the moment and you can say, no, I tell my friends all the time, like, you should not be in any situation doing anything with somebody that you cannot have a conversation with. Because if we can't have a conversation, that puts you in a harmful situation, that puts your partner in a harmful situation too.
I want to add that I think to get an understanding of this history of Black bodies being violated for the sake of forward movement, for the sake of pleasure, for the sake of advancement, one really important book to read or to audiobook or whatever is Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington. Reading that book will help understand a little even more just like how much Black bodies have been sacrificed to make medicine as a whole field what it is today. And that bleeds over into so many other aspects of our life on maternal health journeys, right? Even in our sexual health journeys. Because a lot of the times when you actually do get like some formal education on the STI, a lot of people are getting that from when they go to the doctor and they realize they already have something.
Right.
And so, right, that space has a lot of problematic dynamics by means of people not feeling safe to be able to speak up or talk or without judgment. And there's a lot of other biases that go on there. So I think that that's just an important text to kind of arm ourselves with and be able to better know that history for ourselves. There's a huge trigger warning with this book, though, because it's going into detail about a lot of different things that just are problematic. And let's just keep it at that for now. But to get to your consent question, right, I think specifically when I think of consent can happen in a lot of different contexts. A lot of people don't want to talk about consent because they think that it like has to be unsexy or it's like corny or it's a problem when you're dealing with these conversations and trying to engage in sex. But first of all, you can come with your own lingo and dynamic with your partners to talk about like what do you want to like how do you want to do it? Like my partner and I say, oh, how do you feel about doing something tonight? One, because like, I mean, we have kids. So but another thing is just like, that just feels more comfortable for us. Okay. So, like, and then you can have conversations throughout the day and checking in and seeing how expectations. But here's the thing, when it comes down to the nitty gritty and actually starting to act, you still got to check in. And that's like what we're hinting at here too, is like, just because I said something earlier at 9 a.m. and it's now noon, that doesn't mean that I'm still carrying that 9 a.m. energy. Something could have happened and bad in my day. I'm just not feeling good in my body. And honestly, you don't want to be having sex with someone who is not on consent because you have the most pleasurable sex when your body is relaxed. Right. Your partner and you will feel the best when everybody feels safe. When you're not having safe mental sex, in addition to safe bodily sex, you're not having the best sex. Somebody's not getting what they should be getting. And so that is just something that I think, even if you think the corny situation is there, if you take pride, right, in being a good sexual partner or providing good sex, then something you should be mindful of is that part of doing that means that your partner needs to feel safe. And so getting that okay and figuring out what okay sounds like between the two of you. And with each partner, it can change. Figuring that out, though, and holding accountable to that is very important.
I was gonna when you were talking about like your mind, because the brain is the biggest sex organ that we have, And if you don't feel safe in your mind and your brain cannot turn off in a sense, then your body won't do the things that it's supposed to do. And I think another thing is that your body is always going to naturally react to things, but it still doesn't mean that you have given consent for things to happen in that situation. I think about consent all the time because when I go home, my maternal side is very touchy-feely. And since I don't stay there anymore, when I go back home, there's always like that immediate like guard up because my family is so touchy. And the last time I was home, I was in my nana's kitchen, and I think she had like touched my butt or something. And in my family, that's not something too uncommon, but it triggered me so bad, and I found myself like wanting to immediately like cuss her out and be like, "Do not touch me! Like I do not want your hands on my body." And I had to sit her down and have a conversation with her, and I had to tell her, I know that this is how we were raised, and I know that this is how I grew up, but especially living on my own and being on my own, I'm not used to people just touching my body whenever they feel like it. And of course she was understanding, but also trying to get her to, get out of the things that she's done, because she's only known like, oh, this is my grandbaby, I can touch her whenever I want. And she kind of went on a whole tangent. She's like, yeah, it's your body, your choice. You get to do what you want. Da, da, da. And I'm like, yeah, but I do though. Like, you do have to ask me, to touch me, and you do have to ask me to kiss me and to just like touch my shoulder and do all those other things. And something that me and Brandi talked about in EmpowerHer was having interviews before you have sex with people, to just kind of gauge like, because you shouldn't be getting into a situation somebody slap you for the first time and you be like, I don't know if I like that. Like,
Right.
did we talk
Right.
about this? Did we talk
on that.
about, some of the things that we like? So having that rap sheet and having those interviews and talking about like what are some of your greens? Like what are the things that we can agree on together? What are some of the yellows? Like things that I kind of like, but I really don't know. What are my like hard no's? Like we're absolutely not gonna do that. And also knowing that the deeper the intimacy or just the longer that you've been with this person, some of those things can change, but kind of sticking to the things that we do like and even tapping into the yellows and then sticking away from some of the reds, that's a big part of consent for sure. But people don't really have the language to have those conversations in general. When I tell my friends to have interviews with people, they look at me like I'm crazy, but I'm like, well, how are they supposed to know
Right.
what you like? Most of the time I think men or, men are at a disadvantage because they get into these situations and they're kind of just winging it. So they're kind of like asking for consent without asking for consent. They're kind of, touching and just trying to feel the vibes because we aren't advocating for ourselves and we're not, putting ourselves in that position to know that we also have power. Like if you want somebody to touch you, you can absolutely say that. If you want to have sex with them, you can absolutely say that. If you don't want to have sex with them, you can absolutely say that too. But putting everybody at an advantage so that we're all open to having the same conversation.
I was gonna, hone in on that too. I think that men or the masculine person within the context of the relationship, they unfairly have to shoulder a lot of responsibility with consent and initiating sexual behaviors because, again, that's what we've all been conditioned to think has to happen, and that's unfair. One person should not hold, and that's a lot of power to have in the context of a sexual relationship. And that should not be one person's responsibility. And then the other person just has to sit back and pick up the vibes, right? While the other person is throwing them out there. That's not fair to either partner. And another thing that we talk about in our podcast too is knowing your pleasure. Like, what do you even want? Before we start having the red, yellow, green conversation, what do I actually like? What am I okay with? What do I not like? What have I seen? What have I heard? What conversations have I had with people where I'm like, I might want to try that. Or, absolutely not. Like, what was your tribe, if you will? What is your village telling you that is okay to do in these certain situations? Like, what have you allowed yourself to experience? Because ultimately, your pleasure is your responsibility. Ultimately, my protecting myself from STIs and pregnancy or protecting my consent is my responsibility. So,
I was just gonna say I wanted to add with that too. Like, I also think for people who you don't know what you don't like yet, I think it's also important to like go ahead and set that as a standard. And if you have these kinds of conversations with your partners, whatever you got going on, because you can figure that out in the moment. You can set a space where it's safe to be like, okay, I want to explore and test it, and let's. And then here's the thing: like, not all sex has to be sexy sex. Right? So like sometimes sex is learning sex and relearning sex. So something that I've had to go through before is to be like, I'm switching up what I like and what I don't like. I no longer enjoy this thing as much as I did before. So can we test some things? Can we figure some stuff out?
Absolutely.
Like, I have to do that recently, especially after having children. That changes some things too. Having sexual trauma, that changes things. And when you go through therapy, that opens up doors and closes other doors, right?
Yes.
So just as we grow as humans, things change and shift. So sometimes just even having a safe space to be like, let's figure out now what I like, now what I don't like, or just I haven't done much of anything at all. I don't know, but we can test it out. I think having that as a safe space is really important too. And then my last little point here with men and with masculine folks, I think there's an expectation in society that men in particular are supposed to be okay with anything and everything when it comes to sex. And that starts from young boyhood and just opening the doors to all this sex conversations and expectations with boys and sheltering it's a problem. But what I really wanted to touch on with that is that I think it's also important to remember that masculine folks, y'all have a say too on what to do with your bodies.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to just do everything just because the woman wants it. And if you're with a woman or another partner, another masculine partner, if you're with someone else that is not respecting your boundaries, period, that's for everyone, then you do not want to be in that space. You deserve to step away from that space. And I pray that everybody can safely step away from that space, because it's not always the case. But you do deserve to be able to say what you are okay and not okay with. I've seen so many different stories and narratives, and I see stuff on reality TV all the time. I'm all into reality TV with love shows and stuff like that. But so many masculine presenting folks are often violated physically with women, and then the women are like, what? What is the problem? This is okay. But if we flip that, we've had this conversation over and over again, but if we flip that, it's not okay on the other end, right? And I think that that also means that for us in this feminine space and who present feminine and have those expectations in that line and in relation to masculine presenting people, I think we also need to be reminding ourselves of what's not an okay in terms of consent as well. And also in the bedroom, what's not okay and what's okay. Just like you don't want people grabbing and snatching certain parts of your body and touching things without consent, that also goes for the other side. And that's when you're in hetero or homo kind of relations. So
I love these type of conversations because this is where we learn and grow. And I also want to make sure that our listeners and viewers walk away with, along with consent, that it's also okay to change your mind. And we hinted on that, but I think that there comes a lot of fear and shame and all these other things. There's just like, because to me, it doesn't matter if someone gets all the way down to being undressed. If for whatever reason, as your brain, just something just ain't right, like, and you change your mind, that should just be okay. And I don't think that that's even talked about or taught either, that it's okay to change your mind, whether it's with sex or school or, whatever it is, or what I wanted to eat today. I don't think that we create an environment enough for where people are comfortable with changing your mind, especially something surrounding sex, something that's important and sacred and intimate as that. I think that we should all be trying to work a little harder to create that environment to where people are feeling comfortable enough to, change their mind.
what you just talked about, sex is sacred. Casual sex is a lie. I'm so sorry to tell y'all, it's a lie. I fully believe it's a lie. People talk about being able to have sex with people and it mean nothing. No, it means something. Even if you don't really process that, it means something to the core part of your being, your body. I'm in full belief of that. And so I think that it's just important to remember the respect that your body deserves and your mind deserves, and the respect that other bodies and other minds deserve. And I mean, not everybody takes sex seriously, and you don't have to, but I think that it's just really important to be mindful of the kinds of attachments that can come from something like this, whether you respect that or not, right? Whether you think you feel that way or not, the people around you are likely to have those kinds of connections and things, and it can get messy. And so I just think that it's important to remember that sex is very important. Your body is so important. You are important, and just remembering that as you move in this world.
So let's talk safe sex. When I was being taught sexual health in middle school, the condom, and in our minds, the condom prevented everything. It was to protect against, pregnancy and STDs and, many other things. But we didn't really know about the dental dams and, other type of things. So can we talk about, safe sex?
I think for me, every time I hear, well, safe sex and condoms, like condoms are just pregnancy prevention. That's not safe sex. And nobody wants to talk about the larger conversations that we've been talking about, like consent is safe sex, bodily autonomy is safe sex, knowing what you like and what you don't like is safe sex, being able to advocate for yourself, being comfortable in a space to have a conversation with somebody is safe sex. And I think we get so wrapped up on pregnancy, and it's not that at all. Like there's so much outside of sex than just getting pregnant, which is why I'm a big advocate about teaching people how to track their ovulation to know when they can actually get pregnant. That's safe sex. Knowing what you like and what you don't like. And when we think about the sexual script and we think about just how sex is supposed to go, with the sex script, you have a man and a woman. There's going to be some type of play before, which is typically foreplay. It's only going to last for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. In a couple minutes, and then once the person has the penis is aroused, then you have intercourse, and then they ejaculate, and then it's done. And there's no room for so many things that can go on inside that space. Nobody talks about the fact that foreplay can happen anytime. So I like to call it core play instead of foreplay, because when we think about foreplay, we always think that it has to happen before penetration. Penetration doesn't have to happen at all. Intimacy is so much bigger than that, and having those bigger conversations about what intimacy looks like and what you want for that day. Like maybe I do just want to kiss and cuddle and hold my partner today, and there's safeness in that and there's security in that, but we focus so much on penetrative sex, which is so heteronormative anyway, because we're not thinking about all the other folks that are still out here actively having sex. So what does safe sex look like for people who are in a hetero, romantic relationship? What does safe sex looks like for people who are disabled, people who have things that make it a bit harder or a bit different for them to have the normal sex that we think about. When we think about sex, when people typically have sex, people are always put in missionary, but why is that the standard? What if, something is wrong with my hip? Or what if I have something that doesn't allow me to be put in missionary? So having those conversations beforehand will really help you in having the safest sex you can have. And safe also is kind of, because safe looks different for everybody. And people have different ways and methods of which they have sex. There's always the like vanilla sex and like the normal way to do things, but people have ebbs and flows, and we have to have the conversations that accommodate for all type of kinks and pleasures.
I was just going to say that in this work, I have learned so much. Like even when I'm with Tay and people call in or email us, I sometimes have to look up things because I'm like, didn't know that.
We don't kink shame, we kink
No,
wonder.
absolutely. And so for me, it's an educational piece. And I think too, so words are important to me. And I was listening to your piece about your thoughts about casual sex. I'm very cautious with my words because there are some groups of people who are unpartnered, who are experiencing sex in a different space. So casual sex might look different to that particular group of people. And we've had folks call or email us. And so I'm learning more and more as I talk to people. Words are so important. And I want people to know that there is space for all the things. If you enjoy certain things that seem different than what you were taught as part of your sexual script that you learned growing up, I can guarantee that there is a group of people somewhere who are into that same thing, and your people are out there. So don't feel ostracized or feel like you'll never find your person or your tribe, because they do exist. They might not be here in this community or not widely talked about here in this community, because sex is so much shamed here and it's wrapped in religion. Whole nother conversation. And that's where you lose a lot of people. And so we aren't able to get out with the sexual health conversations and how to protect yourself and the different types of ways in which that. Recently I learned about PrEP as we were preparing for a podcast. PrEP, when you see the commercials on TV, it kind of alludes to the fact that it's for gay men, and particularly in a gay male relationship. But no, PrEP is available to the community. It's free. And it's for anyone who is engaging in sex with multiple partners. So it's anybody that could potentially be at risk for contracting HIV. You can go and get PrEP from your health department or your doctor. There are so many things out here, but if all you know is condoms, and then that's another thing, please stop showing up with Magnum. Bless your heart. Everybody don't need a Magnum. And a regular condom So I do this thing with my kids. I have children ranging from age 26 down to my youngest is 16. And every 6 months or so, 4 or 5 months, whenever I'm feeling it, but definitely every 6 months, we come together and we sit around the table. I cook and we talk about sex to some degree. And it's so that they'll all get comfortable with these conversations. And I've done that since they were little. Just a couple of months ago, we did cake and condoms. I made a cake to invite them all over. I made their favorite cake. So when they got there, my oldest was like, this is a setup. What are we about to do? And then the youngest came downstairs because there was bananas on the table. And they're like embarrassed. But it was for the older ones to show their brother how to wear a condom, how to put one on, how to practice. We turn off the lights. How do you do it without the lights? I want to see how he does it himself. So he's biting it. So we talk about why you do or you do not want to do that.
We got them together.
Where are you keeping the condoms? How to put it on, if you're doing it fast, what are all the things? Yeah. We have the whole conversation so that when it happens, practice makes perfect, right? And that's my way of assisting my children and so that we can learn more. We've done stuff with female condoms so they can see how that works. But I cultivate a space so that they will feel comfortable having these conversations with their partners and even with themselves. Again, you don't know what you don't know until you find yourself in these situations.
You just reminded me of when I saw that scene on Forever, and we had talked about that in one of our meetings before. If y'all haven't seen Forever is this show on Netflix about a young teenage couple and their budding love story, right? And there's a scene in there in which the father is talking to his son about how to put on a condom properly or just using a condom, period. And he's like, go ahead and show me what you know, basically. And the son is like, ripping the thing open, trying to put it on the banana. And I'm like, God, no, he did not just open that with his teeth. For those of you who are wondering, why is this such a big deal to open it with your teeth? You can puncture the condom over here trying to bite this thing open. And if you puncture it, what is the point?
The whole purpose.
It takes the whole thing away. So that's a problem. And then he just slapped it on the banana. No, you're supposed to pinch the tip to leave a little bit of space in there so that you have space for the ejaculate to actually go into without it being too compromising the shape. Okay. Anyway, puts it on. Dad's like, okay, now do it in the dark. So basically that already shows that him doing it that way was okay. And now the problem is, can you put this on in the dark? And he was fumbling over it. And so they had a conversation. Then the dad suggested he carries the condom in his wallet. Well, when you do that, that can also compromise the integrity of a condom because of the heat and the friction. Condoms should be in a space in which they're not dealing with a lot of friction and heat points because that can break down the actual material of the condom. So, knowing how to actually properly handle a condom, carry a condom, work it with you, that's really important. And then there's other kinds of condoms, like we've just talked about. There's a female condom, and instead of going on a penis, right, that goes into the vagina. Knowing that that's an option, that's a tool. Maybe that's more comfortable for some people. Some people, you got to test things out to see what you like. A dental dam is something that you put on as a preventative barrier when you're having oral sex. Or just in dealing with these areas in general. You might be doing some other stuff. But, knowing your tools and knowing how to properly use them is really important. If you don't have a safe space to go to a credible website to be able to look up exactly how to use these things. Know more about your options in terms of tools. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is the sense of normativity, right? So normativity is a term to talk about what's normal. That is a tool traditionally and historically to isolate and to, I'm going to say subjugate, but what I really mean is just to put other people down, right? That is a tool that has been used to say what's right and wrong, and then for the people who are in the wrong to be able to control them and to violate them over and over and over again. It's not that it has to be that thing, but I want people to recognize that this space of what's normal is often used to be able to silence and then to be able to violate those people who you silenced. And so getting away from what's normal in these conversations, because often normal is a myth anyway, getting away from that conversation and just accepting you for where you are and figuring out how to do what you want to do in a safe way, in a respectful way, that's where the focus should be, right? You like something that people are like, what? What's that? Find a different space. And find a space with people who can accept that and praise that, but do it in a way in which nobody's being violated, right? Yeah.
And just to add, I don't think we talk about testing enough in our community. And I try to make it a habit to tell people about it because we know that the medical system has failed us 1,000 times over and has continuously done so. But testing is so important. And talking about when you go to get your annual exam, you know, as a woman or as a femme presenting person, and what that entails and like what you can actually go get tested for. I know that I make sure that I go every year, and every year that I go, I post about it and I tell people like, this is what I got, this is what I opted for, and just allowing people to be advocates and have that autonomy over their body and to know what their options are. Because most of the time we know that, or we can assume that most the men or masculine presented people, they're not going to go get tested. So they're waiting on the femme person to go get tested to then come back and tell like, oh, we're fine, or oh, we don't have X, Y, and Z. And that's one of the biggest problems, especially when we think about HPV too. You know, HPV, just about everybody who has had some type of sexual interaction has had HPV before, but nobody talks about it and nobody knows anything about it. And even the fact that there's no testing for men, so the only way that I'm able to figure out if my partner has HPV is if I take the initiative to go get tested, and it still has to be a vaginal swab, and then it has to come back positive or negative. And having those conversations, because testing is important. Testing is how you figure out what's going on with your body. You don't want things to lie dormant inside of your body because you truly, truly just do not know. But I also do understand the way that the medical system is set up. It makes people really weary about it. But I think some things that the county can do is making it more accessible to people. And again, trying to normalize it, because with the patriarchy, even back to condoms, like, you don't know a lot of women that are carrying around their own condoms because, again, we've just centered it around like, well, he's supposed to have the condom. That's not safe sex for you, though, and that's not putting you in a position of power. Like, you absolutely should be pulling up with your own skin condoms, because magnums are terrible, and pulling up with just something that brings you pleasure and invites you into that conversation, invites you into that intimacy, because your pleasure is important just as well, and what you want out of this, what you want out of this situation is just important too.
So, what does that conversation about testing look like amongst family and partners? I know that we talked about sometimes having those conversations are not sexy, you know, and I know that it is a thing, a good thing that some people before they engage are like, well, let me see your papers, you know, like let's see the results. And sometimes it can almost come across as offensive because it's automatically assumed that, well, I ain't got nothing. Like, but how do you know? Because there may be some things that are lying dormant in you that you just have no idea about because maybe we just don't go get tested. So what does that conversation look like about getting tested before having sex?
Personally, I believe you just have to put it on the floor, and it's uncomfortable. It's not very sexy. As the person who's dating out in this world, it's kind of one of my opening conversations I have with a person. If we're engaging in spending any time together, what I do not want to do is find myself in a situation where, ooh, it's going down and we have not had the conversation. So be that 5 months, 5 weeks, 5 days into whatever happened. I'm I just think you have to open up and have the conversation as two consenting adults, and we're in a space where we it could potentially happen. Then you have to have the conversation. I'm an open book about my chart, and I preach that when I talk to my children. The thing about some STIs, I'm sorry, just as Tay mentioned, certain things can lay dormant, or you wouldn't even notice because most public spaces where you can go get tested, they do the big ones that are easily testable, that you can do blood or urine. So your trichomoniasis, your chlamydias, your gonorrhea, those sorts of things are easily testable. So you can get those at like the health department. But there are certain other things that you wouldn't necessarily notice. Like I think there's a lot of fear around herpes, right? But if you look at the population of our world, I think that the last stats I looked at is that at some point in life, it's something like 85% of people will have had, a cold sore, which is a version of herpes, right? The first simplex. But the herpes that happens on your sexual organs, I think people are looking for this big outbreak, and that's the picture that's painted. But that's not really what happens. So in order to even be tested for herpes, there has to be an open, a lesion. There has to be a sore so that it can be swabbed, right? But on average, those sores, the lesions tend to happen inside the urethra for a man. So it might feel uncomfortable when he urines, but not necessarily the burning that he would feel with gonorrhea or something. It just is like, ooh, that felt different. But you go about your day and you don't think about it. And then for a female, a person with female organs, it might look like, okay, I shaved and I have ingrown hair. So you're not thinking, geez, that's something I need to go have tested. you have all these things and people just don't know. And so if I'm comfortable enough to think I might want to have sex with you or going to have sex with you, I need to be comfortable enough to have the conversation. So that could have been 5 minutes before it happened, 5 months before it happened. But at some point, you just have to say it. And then we've done some stuff on our podcast about role playing, what that conversation might look like if you have something and how to broach it. It's unfortunate. We live in a world with some very immature people, some very toxic people. You can't control what will happen with your information if I entrust it with you or I entrusted with this person that I was trusting enough 5 minutes ago to have sex with. And now that I've shared something to protect you in this sexual space, you're going to use it against me. We can't control that. I know what my intentions are when I go into a space, and that's what I tell people. You know what your intentions are and what you're trying to get across and what you're choosing to share with this person. What they do with that information, we can't control it. Just like when you put something on the internet, you can't control how it comes back. So that comes with some discernment with regard to who you're going to have sex with. It comes with some practice of how to have that conversation. I love my medical provider. And so we have these conversations all the time because then we come back and share it on our podcast. And she has a space in there where people can come and have the conversation with her. And then that practice it serves as a role play so that when they need to share it out in the community or with potential partners, they have prepared in some way. You can't you can't control another person's response, but you have to be in control of, again, that's body autonomy, and that's me controlling how I'm presenting myself in a space. So, yeah, I think you just have to have a conversation. And I believe in having it early and often.
So I am not dating. I am in a marriage. I've been in a marriage and in an exclusive relationship for a very long time now. And it's still important to have the conversations about testing and things of that nature. I think, especially in conversations with other friends who've been in long-term exclusive relationships or marriages or things like that, the reality is that a lot of people still get infected in those relationships, right? And so I think just as a part of your own personal health, even if you are one in a marriage, it's still important to go get the testing at your annual exam. You just go get a test. Is if if you're in each other's face all the time, you don't have to do it as frequently, right? But just getting some kind of test to occasionally check in with your body to see what's happening. And I think that's important also to mention that not every STI is from sex, right? You can still get stuff just out coming in contact with stuff. You can get stuff off of toilet seats and sitting on those bare butt. So I do not recommend that.
Stuff, yes, if you're not cleaning properly.
Yep, exactly. So I think, even if it isn't the case that you suspect that your partner is cheating or, you don't have an open relationship or anything like that, I still think that it's important because one of y'all can pick something up just from having a misfortunate situation in your lap that you didn't realize. So and then try to not have shame about that either. If you do come back with something in your partner or whatever, somebody comes back with something, first of all, it's nobody else's business if you don't want it to be. But then second of all, even if it is someone else's business and they're trying to shame you for whatever kind of status that means about your relationship now, throw that to the side, because the more important thing is that you now know what's going on in your body and you can do something to handle what's going on before it gets out of hand. And in particular, having a family, it's our responsibility as parents to make sure that we're there for our children. And if you're not getting tested and keeping up with your body, then that compromises your ability to be there for your children. So yeah, I just think that that's also important, even if you're in an exclusive long-term relationship, to just at least once a year, just to check in. It's covered with your insurance usually, and if you're out of pocket, there's places you can go so that you don't have to pay arm and a leg. I think there's free testing at the health department, so you don't always have to even pay.
Just to piggyback on that, you do not have to wait for your annual exam. If you've engaged in some sort of sexual interaction, you're like, something feels off, you can, in fact, call your doctor or go to the health department and have STI testing. You feel like you are strapped to wait. Oh, I just had sex in July. I got to wait till January. You do not have to. You can take it upon yourself. It's your body. It's your responsibility. And sometimes it's a situation where, if I've done something and I have to pay, because I need to check on me, then it is what it is. Because I believe in decisions and choices. You made a choice. And so I offer no shame into whatever choice that you made. But now you're here. And so check in with yourself and move forward and do what you have to do to protect your own health.
I think one of the biggest issues is that there's always like this clean versus dirty narrative, which is why people don't want to go get tested because like, oh, well, if I have something, I'm dirty. Like, no, you just have a sexually transmitted infection or disease because you had sex. It's just a product of what happened. So shifting our mindsets around that, and also just understanding, like you said, Brandy, you kind of just got to put it on the floor, and assume good intentions with the person that you're having these sexual relations with. We're not taught to really have tension with people at all. So when we have to have these uncomfortable conversations, people kind of take it as like a dig or like an attack on them personally, but it's not an attack. It's just us trying to come to an agreement about what we're going to do and to make sure that we're doing the best practices to make sure that we're both safe in this situation we have going on.
So now that we've all know better, and have armed ourselves with the education and the resources and the tools, and how do we have these conversations with our children and the youth? Because I think that this is one of those things that we don't want them to make the same decisions that we may have made based off of lack of education. So how do we go about? I know some of you all have children, so, and you did speak a little bit, and I love that, but how do we have those conversations? Because even like, I think it's a conversation that should be had in the church, so how do we go about just initiating those type of conversations with the youth?
I want to jump right in here because I love how my mom did this with me, and I'm trying to do the same thing with my children. My children are young though, so I'm really looking forward to hearing more Randy's take too. But I think that it starts with baby steps, right? You understand what your child can conceive of, can not conceive of, what they're kind of catching on to, what they kind of don't understand quite yet, right? Like, if I bring up autonomy or consent to my 3, almost 4-year-old, what are you talking about? But I can definitely say something along the lines of, hey, we don't just jump on people without you asking. You have to ask first. Is it okay for you to jump on people? Because right, they're that stage where they just want to jump and hop on everybody and everything. But you have to ask. That's not okay, right? So conversations about consent are happening there. But being more specific to what can happen when someone's violating your body too, with regards to sex. Like, this is your penis. No one's supposed to touch your penis. Not especially without mommy or daddy there, and like in a doctor's setting, right? Where the doctor's there and mommy and daddy are there, because some doctors have taken advantage of that, right? So having conversations about what's okay, what these body parts are, what's not okay with these body parts, and when you do or do not touch other people. Hey, we don't put our hands in those areas of other people's bodies. There's books now. There's so many books now, and I'm thanking the Lord for that, because there's so many books now for children to go ahead and open up those conversations. So go to your library. You don't have to buy it. A lot of these libraries have the books. KDL has some books on sexual health for children. And I'm also requesting some other ones that I've seen that I think should be present. You can also request and suggest books. If you see a book out there, you're like, I want to do this, but I don't want to pay for this. You can request and suggest things through KDL. You can go to the website and there's a suggestions portion. If you don't know how to find it, go to the branch, ask them how to get there. You can request books. And I just think that, baby stepping these conversations and letting them grow and develop as times change. Your kids are getting a little bit older. It's going to just shape the conversation a little bit differently. Taking things as you see your children addressing or dealing with certain situations in their lives, paying attention. I know a lot of us are tired though. I'm exhausted, and to be able to pay attention to what they're dealing with is kind of tough, but just maybe even just challenging yourself to take like 5 minutes every so often to just reflect and see like what's going on with my kid. What do you know now? What's going on? So tell me, what's sex again? And just kind of seeing what they tell you. I think that that's super important too.
A couple of things. One, you mentioned you think churches should hold some responsibility in this conversation. Absolutely. If we think about us as a people and our history, typically where we've gotten information for our communities came from the church. So how we learned things and how we learned how we were supposed to show up in community came from a standard that the church provided to us, right? And so leaving this conversation out is very much a disservice to everyone. Leaving what it means to be single and Christian out to people is very much a disservice. So I think churches can do a lot more than is already being done. That's a whole nother conversation as well. But with regard to children, it starts early. Start early and often. Please arm your children with factual information. Tell them about their body parts. When we're walking around telling folks they got pocketbooks and Twinkies and all these things, it's so, all that you're doing is putting your child in a position where a predator who knows differently can then enter a space And we forget that sex feels good. And I repeat that again, sex feels good. So that feels good if I'm a toddler or if I'm 50. Sex feels good. And when you're not arming your children with the space to say no or what this means for their body, you are potentially putting them in a space where they could be victimized. Start early, start often, have the conversation, be their safe space. Shame is a thing. And just because we may have been in homes and environments where we were shamed in our bodies, or cover up, your boobs too big, or put some clothes on, so-and-so coming over, that was not fair. But think of how you felt in those moments, and be better, do better with your kids. Have the conversation. Tell them, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Everything about you is perfect. This is your temple, and this is the one and only you're going to get for the rest of your life. You have all the choices in the world. They have children have so much access, and it starts with that iPad baby, and they can pull up something on the internet at 2 faster than someone who can at 60, and it's all at their fingertips. And the internet, the door is open, and even when we think that we're using parental controls and censoring the information that they have, we really are not. What we're doing is making ourselves comfortable. We're not, in fact, teaching them something so that they can show up and be better for themselves out in the world. Teach your children. I cannot say that enough. In my years as a CPS worker, just wants me to hone in on that. Yeah. Have the conversation. You are uncomfortable. Yes. Sometimes my kids come to me, in my mind I'm screaming, oh no, I don't want to have this conversation. Dear God, no. But I know how to put on, the minute you have the deer in headlights, they're going to stop talking in that moment. So I might say, that was a lot. I'm processing it, but let's talk. Or I need a minute because I'm going to go in the bathroom and scream and cry. But I'm about to come back out here and show up for you because you need me to. Or I might have to walk away and go look on some website and figure out what you just said to me so that I can come back and have the conversation. And I'm going to let you know why I'm uncomfortable. I've never heard of such a thing, son. But let's talk about what that means for your life. And I want my children, no matter what their age, to feel comfortable to come to me. That does not mean, I don't care. All of your successes, yay, I'm cheering for you. I'm so happy for you, and I'm going to show up in all the spaces where you are successful. But it's more important to me when you're feeling like you failed at something, that you're comfortable to come home to mom at any point. If I'm living in a box on the side of the road, there is room in my box for you. And I have capacity for you, and I want you to know that. And there's nothing that you could do that is so terrible that you can't come talk to me about it. And I want them to be comfortable enough with that. And even when they don't know that they have a question, I learn things in our podcast, and I've come home and I'm like, hey, I fried some chicken. Come over here. Let's talk about X, Y, and Z. Guess what I learned? And my kids are like, you're so weird, Mom. And I am. But I love our just the layers of my relationships, especially with my older children. Children are amazing. Little kids are great. But having young adult children, when you're navigating life, my daughter, there was a post that says, my mom is just a girl who's out here trying to figure it out. And I'm like, even when I was married, she was like, Mom, you're so light and airy now that you're divorced. And we talk about things when they were younger. She's like, you've always showed up for me, even when I could tell you were stressed out this particular day, or you might have had something on this day. But when I came in there and I asked about X, Y, and Z, you talked to me about it. I make space for all the things. And it is very uncomfortable, especially when you do not have the answers. But let them ask the question and you figure it out together. That, to me, in those moments is the beauty of parenting. So ask the question, have the conversations often.
I agree. I don't have any kids, but I agree.
I want to add another thing though. So I think back when I was 6, the first time I was out away from my parents and somebody approached me with something that was sexual. I was at a playground with 2 other kids, brother and sister, and they were trying to get me to do something that was very inappropriate. Pulled out a member and pulled out a sexual part, and were asking me to do something with that sexual part. I was 6. They were maybe like 11-ish, 12-ish, right? These are kids on kids. And that's another thing to remember is that when you're off and away, sometimes it's kids doing these things to kids, not just adults. And so knowing how to talk to your kids about how to say no in those situations too, or if they fail to say no, that it's okay. That's not their fault. That's important too. I, in that situation, felt brave enough to be like, no, and I ran home. There's another situation. I think I was probably like 10. And then some older kids, 12, 13, are looking at porn on the computer and showing me that there's, cartoon characters that they put in pornographic situations when you look up on Google Images, right? And so, like, there's all these things that happen when you're just away from your parents over your family's house that you got restrictions at home. They don't have
the
restrictions.
same home environment.
Right. So I think that that's another thing to remember too, is like when you're just out and about, just trying to mind your business and be a kid, sometimes some non-kid stuff falls in your lap, and you need to know how to be able to navigate that and be like, okay, am I okay with this? Right. Like in the situation when I was 6, I was not okay. And I was able to say no, and I ran off. Situation when I was 10 or 11, I was actually quite curious. So I was like, oh, what is that? That's whoa. Right. And I stepped away and I went and minded my business. But then that situation actually turned into something else. The next time they were looking it up, then it started to get into a violating territory, right? So like knowing boundaries, knowing that things can escalate, being able to safely talk to your parents about it, because I didn't feel safe to talk to my mom about either of those situations, even though she made a very safe space around sex. But I knew that if something serious happened that I was able to tell her, but that just didn't feel like maybe I shouldn't, right? So like knowing that it's important to just check in and remind your kids too that it's safe no matter what, if it was serious or not, I think is also important to remember.
And as you were talking, I was thinking of grooming behaviors. Grooming looks different for everyone. And it might not just be this overt sexual thing that you thought, if my child were in this position, it's going to look like this. Oftentimes it doesn't. It starts with something very innocent, and it's building up. And with the children on children thing, we forget sex feels good. So sometimes it could simply be as innocent as, ooh, somebody showed me something and it felt great. I really like you, Anjane. So I want you to feel good too. And I'm sharing that with you, not having any knowledge that this was something wrong. So we have to be very mindful. Gone are the days where you can just send kids, go downstairs and play or go outside. When I hear somebody going to play house, like I get my spidey senses. Now I want to see what y'all doing. So please go play house, because I'm right. I want to play too. What are we doing? What does this look like for us? Kids have so much information. There's so much access. And no longer can we be the parents that turn off and just go drop our kids off somewhere, or turn off and disconnect. And as many days as you might feel like you need to do that, you just can't. And you have to ask the question. And one other thing that I forgot to say, you mentioned KDL. There's also a agency here in Grand Rapids that provides a variety of information and services, and they're free of charge, the Children's Healing Center. And they offer information about sexual exploration starting from 0 on up to age 18, and what's appropriate at different phases of life. And they have a whole lending library there that families have access to. You can go in there and get free counseling if you suspect that your child is doing something that it seems off to you, or it seems different, or you think that they might have experienced something that they're not ready to talk to you about. They offer counseling free of charge. And something to remember about that also, masturbation starts very early. There's research that suggests that masturbation starts at about 6 months of age, with the child rubbing him or herself against their diaper. It's self-soothing. It feels good. So we have to get away from the shame and learn information so that we can arm our children, arm ourselves. These are not conversations that stop just because I got married or just because I turned a certain age. Sex over 50 looks very different than it did over 20, because somebody got bad ankles and bad thighs at this point. I can't
Somebody
do all those
sciatic
things. Right. Don't mess with that sciatic nerve. But I need to feel comfortable with whomever I'm having sex with to have that conversation. It just that you don't know all things. You're not all being and knowing because you hit a certain age. You have to be comfortable enough with yourself to check in. And if I can impart anything about youth, I want my children to be able to check in with me at any age, be able to check in with themselves, and have discernment enough to pick a partner that they can check in with
Even
frequently.
in your 20s, y'all.
Have the please, if you want to have sex with multiple partners, that's your choice. Knock yourself out. But also be responsible enough to know that comes with something. Yeah. That does come with some attachments. One of these people you thought was going to be a situationship, dang, I happen to like him a little bit, but he didn't want a relationship, and he was clear about that at the beginning, so I can't be upset with him. and check in with myself and know that. And so people, these are hard conversations, and it all is your body. And as a woman, you're receiving all of that. You're the receiver of all this energy. What are you going to do with that is something you need to ask yourself.
These conversations are so important, so past due, and I'm incredibly proud and honored that we do have members like you all in the community that hold on to this knowledge and can pass it on. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you all want to plug or shameless plug or give resources or tools to the community?
The Kent County Health Department currently has a survey out that is talking about public access to STI testing. And I believe that survey is available on the GRAHI website. It is also available on various places on social media, as well as the Kent County Health Department. We're looking for some insight as to what has people's experience been with getting STI testing. We know here at our local health department there are long waits, and we are aware of that. But some more data about that, those experiences would be great. So that resource is out available to you. And then Atabia and I also have our social media page, EmpowerHer. And we would love to have you join us and watch some of our antics on social media, our shenanigans.
Quality content.
We're learning all the things together, because sometimes it's just like, huh. Oh, and we do the ABCs of, or the sexual ABCs, which is always a big thing with our listeners as well. So.
Yeah, you can follow EmpowerHer on Instagram. It's EmpowerHer dot, and then we have 4 underscores at the end. We're EmpowerHer on Facebook. And I think that's all you can also email us at empowerher.pvsp, pleasure versus patriarchy, @gmail.com. Yeah. And you can follow me on Womanist Williams, I guess, womanist.williams on Instagram.
And I am Finding My Joy, JOI, Health and Wellness at Instagram.
Well, if you want to learn more about that philosophy stuff, I do a variety of things, but on my YouTube channel's name is Life with Ajane. Ajane spelled AJENE. Please log in, watch, subscribe, like, all that. I cover things like Black philosophy to, uncovers the fact that Black people do philosophy. We've been doing it for philosophy for a long time. When I say Black in this context, I do mean Black American. Long story, we can get in there later. And I also talk about motherhood. If you're interested in law school, I have some resources there in which I go over and I do LSAT advice and LSAT training, and I'll be talking about my law school journey as I apply and do that. So to just help give advice and accessibility to other people. Yeah, those are the main things I'm doing on my channel right now. But in that motherhood space, I also talk about things like perinatal mood and anxiety. I talk about just various things, and I do plan on talking about sex and children and things like that eventually in another YouTube video, but I'm balancing my topics right now. So right now, my next video will be on Afro-pessimism, and that's a really fun topic. And yeah, check out Life with Ajane. I'm also on Instagram under Life with Ajane, and hopefully I'll see y'all in the comments.
But thank you all again so much for coming out and talking to us on today with this important conversation. And we want to go ahead and thank you all for tuning in and listening for another episode of Curated Conversations. I'll talk to you soon.